One thing that our blog post is still missing right now is some images. And so let's now learn how to use the HTML image element. So if we check out the demo page, then we notice that here we have two kind of important images. So we have this big image here which kind of illustrates the blog post, and then we also have the photo here of the author. And so let's now start by incorporating this image here into our blog. So the images are of course in our project folder. So they come with the starter files, and then one that we are going to include here is the post image. So you see when you double click, VS Code is actually able to display image files without any problems. So we want this image right here after this author, and so basically the image serves as a barrier between the beginning of the article and the rest of page. So the top part now, I think that here actually this title here, so this S2 element should be before the author. Let's move that down here. But anyway, let's now include the image element just under the H2. So just like any other element, we start by writing it like this. But now remember how I actually told you in the first lecture of the section that the image element is a special element, and that's because it doesn't have any content, and therefore it also doesn't have a closing tag. Instead, what we do is to simply add a slash here at the very end of the element. Now you might wonder if we don't specify any content here for the image element, and then how will HTML know which element it should display? And that is an excellent question, which brings us to something new in HTML, which are attributes. So attributes are basically pieces of data which we can use to describe elements. So there are lots of different attributes in HTML, and one of them is the source attribute. And so that's the one we are interested in right now. So source goes like this, src, and then equal, and then we need double quotes like this. And then here we can simply specify the name of the image. So remember that it's post image dot jpg, and so we just write post image, and we could even allow VS Code to auto complete the code for us, like by clicking here or going down. And actually that did work, but if we just hit enter here, then that would work just fine. So again we can write it manually or just use VS Code auto complete functionality. And that's actually it. That's the very basics that we need in order to display an image. So if we reload this, here we can see the image just displaying there. So again, let's quickly recap. We do not specify the image using same content in this element. Instead, what we needed to do was to specify an attribute, and in the case, it's the source attribute. And remember that an attribute is basically like a piece of data. So piece of information describing this element. So here we are describing the source for each the browser should basically read the image. Alright, now besides the source attribute, there are other attributes that we can specify for images. And one of that we should never skip is the alt attribute. So we write it like this. And alt stands for alternative. So basically what we need to specify is some text that should describe what the image is about. And this is very important for various reasons. One of them is that it will allow search engines such as Google Chrome to actually know what is in the image. Because without this description, search engines don't really have a known of knowing what the image is actually about. And second, the probably even more important is that by specifying the description of the image, we can also allow blind people to use a website. So users who use a screen reader will not see the image, but instead they will have the screen reader read the alternative text, show the description to them, so never skip this attribute. It's very important to always write a good description. So here let's say that this image here is HTML code on a screen. Okay, now this will not visually change actually what we see here. So let's reload it. Unless the image for some reason cannot be found. So let's say that we forgot the G here. And so now this image path is completely wrong. So if we now reload, here you can see that the description here is printed. So that's the HTML code on a screen that we gave it here. Okay. So that is actually another use case of the alt text. Let's put it back and reload it again. And we are actually still not done. So we can specify some more attributes here which are quite important in this case. So that ones that I mean here, the image width and the image height. So right now this image here is a little big, too big. And so let's specify its width to, so besides the width we can also specify the height which should be 200. And so if we reload this, we can see here it is like this. You see here that the original image is a 1000 by 400, and so if I specified the width as 500, which is just half of 1000, then the height must be also be half of 400 here, so that would be 200. Okay, so that should now look the same, and it does. But of course, if I wanted, I could make it a square, for example, which would then completely distort the image just as we see here. Of course, we don't want that. So, great. So, this is how we include images into an HTML document. And this one here was only the first one that we wanted. The other image is the author image right here. And about this author page right here. So, the image that we want now is this Laura Jones. And here we just follow the same structure. And here I'm specifying width as 50 and height as 50. And I'm just closing it. And let's just quickly try to, yes, here you can see that the Laura Jones picture is also depicted, which is actually look like the same in the demo page. And then Prettier does this nice job of putting each of these attributes here in one line, which makes it really easy to see. Actually, let's close down our sidebar here and let's see. And here we go. So here is the picture of Laura Jones now. Okay, well done. Nice progress. So now we know how images work and how attributes work as well. And actually, we can specify attributes also on some other elements in HTML. And one where this is very important is actually the HTML element itself. So here in this HTML element, we should specify the language that we use for the web page. So for this document, and we can do that by saying lang. So specifying the lang attribute, and then in this case, since it is English, we can set it to an en. But for other languages, there are other codes. For example, for German, probably de, or for Portuguese, it should be pt. And if you have any other language, you can just easily find out the code by Googling. Another thing that we can and actually should do, which needs attributes, is to specify the character set that is used in the document. And that is something that goes into the head because it is a piece of information that describes the document. So here we need another new element. This is simply called meta, which stands for metadata. So metadata means data about data. And so here we are describing that the character set which we describe by this attribute. So we say that the character set should be UTF, which is basically all the simple characters that we use in the English language. Now this one here is another of these elements that doesn't have a closing tag. So we just close it like this. Okay. Now I'm not spending a whole lot of time on these elements on this kind of stuff because later when you actually build your own web page, then this will happen automatically. Okay, so this was just to show you that this is just another way or another place in which we need some attributes where we then need to specify a value for it. Alright, so yeah, I think that's it for this lecture. So see you in the next one.